Absolutely. No, thank you for continuing to tell your mother's story even after life, right? I mean, this is legacy. This is
Yeah,
something
yeah,
that, right? I mean, this is why for me in my own personal life, right? I want to make impact on individuals so that someone maybe that loves me, maybe my children, or I don't have any kids now, but in the future, right? Will share my
yeah.
story like you are. What's your hope, George, with continuing to share your mother's story?
Well, basically the thing that she hopes for, and it's the introduction of the Orishas, particularly to our people. And
Mm,
my mother kind of believed. She kind of believed that there was a definite miseducation when it came to who we are and who
mm,
these Orishas are. And I mean, most of our people shunned away from this type. They'd see our paintings and be scared of it, just off the basis of, okay, they're black spiritual beings, and what is this? And this is kind of weird, and maybe this is some kind of thing to do with hell or whatever. It's been so demonized, and that characteristic that of our culture that's been missing from our people is something she believed needed to be restored. And I think later on in life, somewhere she will be known basically as somebody who actually did a good thing by restoring and making these Orishas known to the public.
The Obeah Woman by Anastasia the Phoenix Armourer. Chapter 10. Later that night, in the realm of the netherworld, how black was the darkness. The stillness, the coldness, the darkness unchanging, so undisturbed. In the evil depths of it, Samuel the Black dwells with his demons. The sound of his breathing echoed through the dark clammy halls. He sat on his throne in the darkness, in deep contemplation, not wanting to be disturbed. Suddenly, in the halls, he heard a shuffling. An instant annoying sound that moved closer towards him. He knew what it was, and it irritated him to the core of his being. So, you have come, Kokaka. His deep voice destroyed what was left of the silence. Yes, great lord, it is me. Kokaka bent low before the evil overlord. Where is Dora Van Hart? He asked, as he sat with his throne turned away from her. I'm sorry, great one, but she is more powerful now than I can tell you. Kokaka kept her body close to the ground. You're telling me that your great plan failed? He shouted, his voice echoed through the halls. Kokaka laid flat on the ground as he swung his throne around to face her. Is that what you're telling me? You promised me if I give you the money for Shanka, that you would be able to trap Dora, so where is she? Answer me? He screamed at Kokaka. I'm sorry, my lord, she escaped us. Kokaka trembled as she kept her body on the ground. Us? You mean that she has escaped you? You Kokaka. You are useless. Completely useless. Suddenly, the taps of high heel shoes echoed in the halls, moving quickly into his chambers. Nahima entered the room, like only she could. Her beauty is beyond compare, and no man or spirit could resist her. Get out, Kokaka. I want a word in private with your king. She smiled in a condescending manner at the old crone whose beauty she had stolen, as Kokaka crawled out of their presence on her hands and knees. Samuel leaned back on his throne, as Niama walked in. He was dressed in a black robe embroidered with small diamonds that looked like the stars in the night sky. He was a tall, handsome, white man with long black hair and eyes that revealed the evil in his soul. Niama walked up the small flight of steps to his throne. She is the only person that he allows to stand in his presence, or to approach him in such manner. She wore a long blue silk dress of oriental design. Her long black hair flowed down her back to the ground. Her eyes were as green as emeralds and her long silky legs peeped through the slit in the side of her dress. Niama sat on Samuel's lap and kissed his cheek ever so gently. What is it you want from me this time, Niama? he asked as he looked into her beautiful green eyes. "You have not told me why Dora Van Hart is so important to you, and I would really like to know." She stroked his face seductively. "Curiosity killed the cat Neema, and that is my personal business. I could get her for you, if you told me why you wanted her so badly." Samuel just looked at her in a manner that told her not to pursue it any further. "Well, I will still help you. I know just how to get her." She smiled at him as she moved his finger over his lips. Her lover Red Claw is in trouble, and she would do anything to help him. "My imps tell me that she would like the Eye of Ra to cure him. If you give me the stone, I will use it to bring her to you." Samuel closed his eyes as he contemplated her proposal. "Oh, come now, Samuel. You must have faith in me." "Okay, but if your plan fails, and you lose that stone, I will be very angry with you." "I won't fail." Neema was very confident that her plan would work. Samuel opened his hand, and there in his palm appeared a beautiful gem attached to a long golden chain. Neema took the jewel from his hand, kissed him gently, and left his chambers. The next morning, after breakfast, Sandra took Angela to school, leaving Dora to get ready to go to her restaurant. She and Ingrid had spent the entire day yesterday cleaning and getting it ready to open again for business. She was just about to walk out the back door when she heard someone call her name at the front gate. Dora walked out her front door and up the path to the gate, where an East Indian woman stood looking like she had been beaten half to death. Her face was swollen with 2 black eyes and there were cuts on her forehead and lips. Her left arm was in a sling, and she held her stomach with her right hand. As Dora approached, her tears rolled down her cheeks. "My God, woman, what happened to you?" Dora opened her gate and took the battered woman into her arms as she began to sob uncontrollably. Dora helped her into the house and sat her down at the kitchen table. She then took a bottle from her shelf and poured some of its powder into a cup. She took the kettle from the stove and filled the cup with water. The woman sobbed as she blew her swollen nose into a small washcloth. "Here, drink this. It will stop the pains." Dora fed the drink to the woman and made her drink all of it. Dora then sat next to the woman at the table and waited for her to compose herself and tell her story. After a few minutes, the woman stopped crying and began to speak. "My name is Lila Dowlat, we are Hindus." The woman blew her nose again, as more tears flowed down her cheeks. "Did your husband do this to you?" "No, ma'am. My husband is a kind, gentle man who would not hurt anyone." "Then how did this happen? Who did this?" Dora held the woman's hand to help her steady herself. "A shadow creeper," the woman whispered. Dora could feel the fear surging through the woman's body. "What?" Dora was stunned. She could hardly believe her ears. "I didn't even know what that was until 3 days ago. I had no idea that kind of evil existed in this world." "Please, Lila, start from the beginning." "Okay, I will try. 9 years ago, my husband moved us to a village in Maraval. He was a young doctor with 2 children who were quite young also. Gamla, the oldest, was 6 and Mirun was only 3. The house was modest, but it had 3 bedrooms, so the girls each had their own room. In the village there was a man called Simon Slag. He had a little girl about 6 years old that he was raising by himself. As time went by, we learned from the villagers that Mr. Slag's wife had died in the hospital shortly after she had given birth to his daughter. Mr. Slag hated hospitals and all doctors, due to his wife's death. Naturally, he did not like my husband, but his daughter, Marcel, and my daughter Gamla became friends. They went to the same school together, and they played together all the time. For 3 years, the 2 girls were inseparable. Until one day, my daughter came home and told me that Marcel did not come to school that day. So she went to her house to see why. Gamla came back home and told me that her little friend was very sick. She could hear her crying from outside the house, but Mr. Slag sent her away saying that Marcel will be better tomorrow. However, the next day, Marcel was still not in school and Carmela was becoming more and more upset. She begged her father to go to Mr. Slag's house to help her friend. My husband first said no, because he knew how Mr. Slag felt about him. However, Gamela was so insistent that my husband finally gave in and went to see Marcel. They could hear her crying from outside the house. Gamela knocked on the door. Mr. Slag came out and yelled at them to go away. My daughter can be very persuasive. She convinced Mr. Slag to allow her father to examine Marcel. My husband told Mr. Slag that the child had appendicitis, and she must be taken to a hospital immediately. The man shouted at my husband and told him he would never take his daughter to a hospital. If my husband wanted to help her, he would have to do so there, in his house. My husband tried to help the child, but his efforts were too late. The child died of a ruptured appendix. Mr. Slag was beside himself with grief. He beat up my husband and threw him out of his house. He vowed that he would make my husband pay for his daughter's death. After his daughter died, Mr. Slag just disappeared from the village, and after a few years went by, we had forgotten all about him. 6 years had passed, and not a word from him to anyone in the village. Then, Sunday night, about midnight, my husband and I were awakened by screams coming from Gamela's room. She is 15 years old now and Myron is 12. We ran into her bedroom and turned on the light. We saw this thing that looked like a three-dimensional shadow on top of my daughter. My husband rushed forward and jumped on top of it, but in an instant, he was tossed backwards through the air and hit himself hard against the wall. I picked up a chair and struck the creature, only to find myself flying through the air also. My husband and I lay in a heap on the floor when the creature walked over to us and glared down at us with horrible red eyes. His eyes were all that we could see on his face, the rest was shadow. He said, "You killed my daughter 6 years ago, Dowlat, now I'm going to have yours." We were stunned. We knew that this creature was Mr. Slag. We were terrified, as we watched the creature become a flat shadow on the ground and move out of my daughter's bedroom. Gamela was screaming hysterically. My husband and I did all that we could to calm her down. We called the police. They came and examined the house. They did not believe our story, because the house was not broken into. We thought that the creature had gotten its revenge, and hopefully, we would not hear from him again. However, we were wrong. The next night about the same time we heard screams coming from Mirun's room. We entered her room and saw the creature. We attacked it, but we were thrown backwards like before. Again, we called the police, and again, we realized that there was nothing that they could do. So my husband got a gun, and the next night the girls slept in our bed. My husband left the lights on, and kept the gun under his pillow. That night, the creature came into our room. My husband took his gun and shot at it. He emptied the gun into the creature, but it had no effect whatsoever. The creature pulled my oldest daughter off the bed and dragged her by the hair into her bedroom, and raped her again. My husband and I were beside ourselves. We called the police again. We then packed up the girls' things and took them to a friend's house. The police convinced my husband and me to stay, so that they could catch the creature. We agreed. As long as one of the officers stayed inside the house. Then, that same night, about midnight, the creature came back. It appeared in our bedroom. My husband shot at it again with still no effect. The police officer who was sitting on the couch in the living room ran up the steps to our bedroom. He burst in with his gun drawn and also shot at the creature to no avail. The creature waved its hand, and the gun flew out of the officer's hand and he went flying backwards down the stairs. The creature screamed at us, asking for the girls, but we told him nothing, even though we were terrified. He beat us with his fists, but we told him nothing. Then he raped me. It was horrible. Then, he told us that if the girls were not back there tonight, he would kill us both. The police cannot stop him. They have told us as much, but one of the villagers gave us your name and address. He said that you would be able to do something about this. So please, Ms. Dora, would you please help us? Please help us. The woman sobbed long and hard. Yes. I will do all that I can to help. I know these creatures well, and I know how to destroy them. It will be all right. Dora reassured the woman. Just then, Sandra returned from taking Angela to school. Sandra, this is Mrs. Dowlatt. I am going to be spending the day and night at her home. Please, take care of things for me until I return tomorrow. Yes, Mother Dora, I will. Dora put everything she would need into her truck. Many torches, because shadow creepers are afraid of fire, and most importantly, her black arrows and crossbow. They are the only weapons that would kill a shadow creeper. Red Claw would like Dora to use one of these same arrows to kill him also. When all was ready, Dora put Mrs. Dowlatt in her truck and drove with her to Maraval. Mrs. Dowlatt directed Dora to Celestine Village. An upper-middle-class place with large houses, manicured lawns, and swimming pools. Dora was surprised. This was not the image she had in her mind. They then drove into the driveway of a large house. Dora parked her truck behind two Mercedes. Mrs. Dowlatt, how did you get to my house? I took a taxi. The driver knew exactly where you lived. They got out of the truck and went into the house. It was huge, with white walls, white furniture, and huge glass windows. There was a large staircase, leading upstairs with a beautiful brass railing. On one wall, there was a collection of swords, and on another, large modern paintings. Just then, Dr. Dowlatt walked into the living room. He was a tall East Indian man with dark skin and a very gentle manner. Hi honey. This is Ms. Dora. She has agreed to help us. Lila walked over to her husband and touched his face gently. The man walked over to Dora and shook her hand. Thank you for coming. Did my wife explain to you all that has been going on here? Yes, and I am here to destroy the shadow creeper. The man and his wife both sighed in relief. Now, I must seal the house so that I can trap the creature. Dora went to every room in the house and magically sealed every window. She moved downstairs and sealed the back door. She left the front door unsealed as to allow the creature a way in. Dora set up her things in the living room. She took out her torches, and told the Dowlatts that once the creature was in the house, she will light the torches, and have them stand with the torches in front of the front door. Dora used her healing magic to heal Mrs. Dowlatt. They had lunch, and Dora talked with them about the Bakwas and the shadow creepers. The day passed by quickly, as they settled down, and waited for the shadow creeper. The Dowlatts were frightened, but they were comforted by Dora's presence. She instructed them to turn on every light in the house. They then sat on the sofa in the living room with the torches in hand, watching the television, trying desperately to remain calm. At midnight, the shadow creeper came into the house by way of the front door. He entered the living room and the television set exploded. Where are the children? They belong to me, he shouted. Mrs. Dowlatt dropped the torch and held onto her husband. They were so frightened that they could not move off of the sofa. Dora took a small stone out of her pocket, and held it in her hand. It became a fireball, and she threw it at the creature. He howled and flew up the stairs. Dora rushed over to the Dowlatts, and took the torches and lit them. She then gave the lit torches to the Dowlatts and positioned them at the front door. No matter what happens, you must stay right here with these torches. If you move, he will escape. Dora placed her quiver of black arrows onto her back, and took her bow in her hand. She placed one arrow in her bow and held it at the ready, as she walked quietly up the stairs. She could hear the creature banging on one of the bedroom windows trying to get out. Dora crept closer and closer to the room. The door was open and she saw him at the window. She steadied herself in the doorway and raised her bow. At that moment he turned and saw her. He let out a howl and quickly dematerialized. Dora's arrow missed him, as he flew past her, knocking her on her ass. The creature flew down the hallway and into another room. Dora scrambled to her feet. Suddenly the lights in the hall began to explode. Soon the entire upstairs was in complete darkness. Dora could not see him, but with her keen ears, she could hear him breathing. She crept closer to the room as he tried desperately to get the window open. Dora centered herself as she began to feel his vibration emanating from the room. She placed another black arrow in her bow, and crept to the door. The light from the outside shined through the window as the creature struggled to open it. He turned again and saw her, and he flew past her, slashing her face with his clawed hand, knocking her out of the way, and flying downstairs. Dora scrambled to her feet again and took off after him. She could feel the blood rushing from her face. The Dowlats were screaming loudly, but they held their torches in front of them and did not move. Dora ran down the stairs. She saw him at the back door. She was determined not to miss this time. She raised her bow and let the arrow fly, striking the creature in the back. He let out a howling scream, as he imploded and fell to the ground as a pile of ashes. Dora quickly took the torches from the Dowlats and extinguished them. Then, she instructed Mrs. Dowlat to vacuum up the ashes and take the bag outside.